This is the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, episode 54.
Hi, this is Kelly Buttrick of KB Voiceovers, doing my best to sound conversational on a promo, but I want to make sure and tell you to take notes. John Melly and his guests give some great advice on the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, so write it down or type it in and you won't forget a thing.
Hey there, it's John. How are you? Thanks for spending some time with me today. I do appreciate it. It's been a few months, hasn't it? Been kind of crazy. And honestly, I've been in a little bit of a funk. I don't do well with the winter, and I live in New England, so what are you going to do about that? Well, fine. Take some vitamin D, my friend. Yeah, that's what I do. Also get some exercise in and all that. Just attending to my business. Got a number of things going on in my world that are, getting in the way of things, but everything for the most part is good. It's just very hectic. And I must admit, the older I get, I turned 50 back in December. The big 50. I must admit, I think the winters bother me more. And I honestly will admit, I have been in a bit of a creative funk of late. And I'm pushing on with this podcast to, push on with my obsession about the podcast. I love doing the podcast. And we've got a lot of people who like the podcast as well. As a matter of fact, as I say in every episode, I give you an update on the number of downloads. And despite my not publishing on a regular basis for like 3 or 4 months now, we've got just under 70,000 downloads of all the episodes of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. We have, as of this recording, 69,926 downloads. And this is an aberration, but on March 10th, we had 823 downloads on March 10th alone. But since the last episode of the podcast, there have been over 11,000 downloads of the podcast. So thank you. Not a day goes by where we don't get downloads of the podcast and people subscribing to the newsletter list, the email list. And for people who are on my list, I'm sending out messages about past episodes with different themes that are covered in each episode. And if you're not getting that, go to voiceovermarketingpodcast.com and click on the subscribe. Fill in your name and email address. These go out once a week. I think on every Tuesday they go out, and there's no sales pitch at all other than to go, hey, listen to this episode if you haven't, or re-listen to it if you already have, because I find that when I re-listen to stuff, I hear things that I hadn't heard before. And also sometimes you hear things that you've heard before, but for some reason it takes a different tack, or it just sounds different to you, or you think about it in a different way. So what's this episode about? Like I told you, I've been in a bit of a creative funk in the last few months. I've been working on other things as well. So the podcast, just sort of went over here to the side a little bit, but we're back at it. And, it's a personal thing for me to share with you, but I think it's important to share it with you, warts and all. I ain't perfect. I think that's part of the problem with social media is that for a lot of people, everybody looks at everybody's stuff and says, oh, wow, what an amazing life they have. And, you start to think, oh, well, why, how come I'm not doing all that stuff? Well, I'm here to tell you, I ain't perfect. I got my moments where I'm like, I don't want to do this. And it's a struggle just to, do the stuff that you have to do some days. And I'm no different than anyone else. The difference is that even though I wasn't publishing, the podcast was on my mind, and I knew I would be back doing this and not giving up. And that's kind of the theme of today's episode that I want to share with you. I was listening to an audiobook. You pick them up because you think, oh, there might be something interesting. And there are times when I start to listen to an audiobook and I'm thinking, I don't really like either the delivery or I don't like the messaging, whatever it is. And I kind of felt this way about this particular audiobook. I'm not going to go into what the title was, but there was something about the person. It was read by the author, or it was performed by the author, because he went off book quite a bit. And it was about being obsessed with things that you're passionate about. It was basically The book was about going all in on stuff. And it was interesting because he talked about businesses needing to change. And I know that if you've downloaded my personal story marketing piece, which is free, there's a link to it in this episode on the show notes and in pretty much every episode for the last 6 months or so. In my personal story marketing piece that you can download, you can get a copy of that for free. If you haven't, please do. If you've read it, you'll have seen that I talk about my family business. I don't talk about it a lot, but it was a big part of my life for a long time. When I graduated college, shortly after I graduated college, my parents bought a stationery and office supply retail business. And, it was a different thing for my family. I had worked in retail for a long time, just through jobs during college and high school and things of that nature. I'd had a lot of exposure to retail. My parents, not so much. It was a stationery and office supply business. The thing is that Staples started right around the same time. And I'm talking about this in the sense for the need for businesses to change and grow and evolve. And if you think about it, everything in our lives changes and evolves over time. And our businesses should really not be any different. And this author actually made this point. He said, look, I don't comb my hair or get the same haircut that I had 10 years ago. I'm not wearing the same shoes or the same clothes that I had 10 years ago. And it was kind of an interesting perspective. And that's why I like listening to these audiobooks. There was something about this person's delivery that made me say, okay, try and set your prejudice or your preconceived notion about the beginning of this book and see if there are some nuggets in there that you can take away. I don't know why. If I had succumbed to my this guy's driving me crazy, what am I going to listen? I'm not going to listen to the rest of this. If I had stopped, I would have been on disc 1, and now I'm on disc 9. And there have been parts of the book that I've really liked, and there's been parts of the book where I'm like, okay, enough, I get the point. But this was an interesting point, and it's sometimes you got to be open to find the nuggets that you really aren't expecting. And this was one of them, and it reminded me of the story of my business and my family's business. The point that he made about I'm not cutting my hair the same way that I was 10 years ago, and I'm not wearing the same clothes I was 10 years ago. And I thought, well, that's true in my case. I don't have anywhere near as much hair as I did 10 years ago. That's just the way it is. And I'm in a lot better shape than I was 10 years ago. I'm in better shape at 50 than I was at 40. And I'm proud of that. I'm excited about that. But it made me stop and think about businesses. So I looked at my own family's business. Like I said, it was a stationery and office supply store. We'd sell, calendars and typewriter ribbons. That's back when typewriters were still around. And typewriter ribbons were so frustrating because every different manufacturer of typewriter did something a little different so that you had to buy their typewriter ribbons and their correction ribbons and all of that. So you couldn't buy something else. You had to buy theirs. And smart, it's like the Gillette razors. They have their own razor cartridges that you need to keep putting in if you want to keep using the razor. It's built-in continuous revenue. I understand why businesses do it. This was around the time that Staples started to get on its feet. We did okay for a while, and then we had a lot of retail foot traffic, and we had some commercial business, call that the backdoor business, where people would call up and order their office supplies, and I would actually go around the greater Boston area and deliver the office supplies. And Staples continued to grow, and then Office Max came along, and we started to focus. One aspect of our business was we were printing wedding invitations. We had all those books that you could come in and select your wedding invitations and your response cards and your envelopes and the font. And did you want thermography or did you want it embossed? We started focusing on a lot of that. And then we did our calligraphy where we would address the envelopes and the response cards and all of that kind of stuff so that people would mail all of those things in. We started to focus more on that business because the commercial deliveries, people were buying stuff from Staples retail for less than we could buy the products from our wholesaler. To give you an example, if you went to Staples and bought a case of copy paper, 8.5 by 11 copy paper, let's say it was $25. Well, we were paying from our wholesaler $28 and charging our customers like $35 with free delivery. So you could go to Staples yourself and buy it for less money than it cost us to get the product in the store for us to resell it to you. So we started looking at that, and the business just sort of drifted away. The commercial part of the business drifted away. That was a substantial amount of income that slowly over time eroded. And we would focus on our service, but the prices, people, we've moved into this, I'll mention the company's name, this Walmart mentality where we want to pay next to nothing for our products and our services. And yet at the same time, and I don't want to get too far into it, but everything has a cause and effect. We want to go buy stuff at the Christmas tree shops and at the big box stores, and they're paying people minimum wage and keeping them part-time, whereas these small local mom and pops were full-time businesses where people earned a full-time income, paid their mortgages, were able to send their kids to school and all of that. And now we've got a whole bunch of people working part-time jobs at minimum wage because everybody wants to buy stuff on the cheap. And then on top of that, everybody wants health care and daycare and all the wonderful things that you can get through the business. But in order for anybody to be able to pay the bills and make money, they got to outsource it or send it off to some other country for a lower manufacturing price and sell it on a very small margin. And the economy's drying up. And people are going, well, how come we're not, how come all these jobs are disappearing? Never mind automation. You talk about the wedding invitation business. The economy has shifted dramatically. I did an episode on Uber. Is Uber destroying voiceover, I think was the name of the episode. But it's all Evites and do-it-yourself wedding invitations. And people have decided to take that on and do it that way, and it's shifted. And for younger folks, that type of invitation is more acceptable and expected rather than getting something in the mail. Do the unexpected. That's another marketing thing. I could go into a whole episode on this. When's the last time you received a birthday card in the mail or a St. Patrick's Day card in the mail or a handwritten thank you note? When you get I got one the other day. I helped somebody out with a project they were working on, and they had been working on it for over a year, and the audio production was like a culmination. It like brought everything together for them. And so I got this wonderful thank you note from somebody, and it was handwritten. It was left on the console of my studio. I still have it. I know I've talked about thank you notes before. Handwrite a thank you note. Handwrite a birthday card. You will stand out. It's so important to do. Be different. So we had to look at all of that. I'm going off on different tangents here, but this is like a stream of consciousness episode, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. If not, well, hey, you've probably left already. Anyway, I'm speaking my mind. And that's that about that. But no, what I'm saying is that we had to look at how the business was changing. So we ventured into art supplies to see if people were doing that. If people would come in. We needed to have a draw. What is it that people will come for that you can't just get everywhere else? And look at what online retailing is doing to brick and mortar retails. People are ordering stuff online. I do. I order stuff online all the time. I get it. In many ways, it's a lot more convenient. You don't have to fight for parking. Somebody brings it to you. You save all that time. But then you also lose out on the ability to see other options too. Another aside, but I understand it. I've embraced it. I'm part of that thing. I don't shop at Walmart. I try and stay away from the big box stores as much as I can. I try and shop locally. That's... having been in retail, having been a small business owner in a retail location, that is such a hard business that if I'm interested and they give me good support, good service, and a great product, I want to support them. That's what I do. That's my choice. That's how I choose to spend my money. And yeah, I might spend a little bit more money, but those folks working there are putting money back into the community. You know, it's all part of the local economy. It's not going off to some place, no offense, wherever Amazon's located. And I don't like to sound provincial because I have customers all across the country and I have customers around the world and I do business with them. But when I'm buying stuff in the neighborhood that I can get in my neighborhood, I do that, you know. We're looking at that, and the art supplies didn't really go very well. So we sent them back. And then right next door to our office supply business was a card shop. It was a major card retailer. You can find them in most drugstores now. But for whatever reason, that business decided to go out of business. And what we did was we expanded. And we knocked a hole in the wall and started selling our own cards. We bought greeting cards from all over, from a lot of smaller manufacturers, you know, local artists, photographers that made their own greeting cards. And we picked out classy greeting cards. My mom was very specific. She said, I'm not going to have greeting cards that exploit other people, you know, like the beefcake guys and the girls in the, you know, lingerie and all that kind of stuff. My mom's philosophy on that was, you can get that anywhere. I want to raise the level of discourse here, and I want to be classy about everything that we have. And we'd have people coming in and say, hey, do you have anything like a little more raunchy than these? And we'd say no. And we lost some business that way, but that was fine. We weren't attracting that kind of customer. Maybe we should have, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I'm wrapping up into this episode that's important. We were choosing to cater to a certain clientele. We wanted to attract a certain client, a certain customer. And 10 to 1, we had people coming in saying, you have the most beautiful greeting cards. They're so different from anywhere else. And every once in a while we get someone saying, hey, don't you have something a little more risque? And we say, nah, you can get that pretty much anywhere. We're trying to do something a little different here. And we were pretty good at that. And eventually, because things were changing in the office supply market between Staples and Office Max and Office Depot, there's another one that came into the whole thing. We just slowly phased that out. We had a small little corner with some pens and pen refills and some Post-it notes and some notepads. We had the photocopier that we would do and the fax machine that we would get people to come in and use. So people used to send and receive faxes, you know, and not everybody had a fax machine and it wasn't all email. I mean, this is going back. It wasn't that long ago, but this is what we did. We provided that. We did a packaging business. You know, people would come in and do shipping and packaging and receiving. We did that. We were kind of like a UPS store or mailboxes, et cetera, kind of thing. And that worked for a while. And then that sort of changed too, because UPS took over mailboxes. So you have all these things happening in your market. And we were doing a lot of social printing. We were doing a lot of retirement invitations and birth announcements and wedding invitations and shower invitations and retirement parties and bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and first communions and confirmations and all kinds of stuff. We were doing all of these invitations and social printing occasions, and we had greeting cards and all of that. And that became more successful than the office supplies, so we moved away from the office supplies and we became primarily a greeting card and invitations and wedding invitations business, gift wraps, gift bags, all of that. And then just to show you that the knockout that you never expect is coming is September 11th happened. And you say, well, how the heck would September 11th impact a stationery and office supply and greeting card shop? And it did, because we were so taken aback by what happened. This entire country was so down, saddened, angry, felt betrayed. Remember that? If you were around for September 11th, do you remember that day? It was awful. We found out that the guy who actually worked on the software or worked for the company that developed the software for our social printing business a guy I went to high school with was on the first plane that went into the World Trade Center. And so he passed away. And we were just dumbfounded by that. You know, he had moved to a different company at that point, but he was the guy who actually trained my folks on how to use the software to do a lot of the social printing. And I went to high school with him, and I'm not sharing this to, for pity or anything like that, and Ted's death had nothing to do with the functioning of the software. But what happened in the society was everybody was down. And we literally would have people coming in and cancel orders because they canceled their events. There was a period of time where people were asking if it was okay to celebrate anything. People held off on parties. And, my folks were getting older anyway. They'd been at it a long time. And, everybody was married. Everybody was out of school. You get into these things where you do them so regularly. They become part of your process, your daily habits, if you will. And we actually had a family meeting. We were saying, what are we doing this for? Who are we doing this for? And it got to a point where we were like working for everybody but ourselves. And my parents just decided, you know what, it's time to retire this thing. So we had a retirement sale. I tell you that story arc because it's not like you can predict what's going to happen. There are outside forces that are going to impact your business. Things that you can see coming and things that you'll never see coming. And when this guy said, if I'm not changing my business and evolving my business, then I'm just resting. I'm not growing. The business is actually starting to die. And was our stationery office supply greeting card shop overly successful? Did it knock it out of the park? No. Did it struggle a lot? Yeah. But it did what it needed to do for the time being. Do I wish it had been more successful? Of course. But it was a wonderful learning experience. And when this guy said, I'm not cutting my hair the same way that I did 10 years ago, and I'm not wearing the same clothes I wore 10 years ago, and my business isn't the same as it was 10 years ago, I thought, you know what? He's absolutely right. Your voiceover business needs to evolve as much as any other business. We went from office supplies to art. We had some art supplies and invitations. We did some in-house printing, and then we moved into another space and took over a greeting card shop area. We put our own stuff in, gift lines, all that kind of stuff. Phased out the office supply business because that wasn't working for us. We had a commercial delivery business that was happening, and that kind of phased out on us just because we couldn't compete. And then we did packaging and shipping business, and that was profitable for a long time. And then, other market forces came into play, and we adapted, and we moved solely into greeting cards and stationery. Paper by the pound we did. I didn't even mention that before. But desktop publishing was becoming more popular, so we started to become a supplier for people who did a lot of their own printing. And then we did a lot of in-house printing. So we were adapting. We were constantly changing the business. And, then something happened. And then, on top of all of this, my dad needed to have a surgery for his heart. He's still alive, thank God, but he needed to have heart surgery. And it was all of those things where he said, you know what, let's just retire this thing. It did what it needed to do. All of these things happen. And so I'm sharing this with you to say, your voiceover business needs to evolve. It needs to change. So does mine, and mine has. And when you listen to things and you hear things like this, it's like, you know what? I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. Why should my business be the same as it was 10 years ago? What am I doing differently now than I was doing 10 years ago? Like I said before, I'm in better shape at the age of 50 than I was at the age of 40. How cool is that? I don't have as much hair as I did at the age of 40. I don't care. So when I heard that, it was like bang. You know what? That's right. So how has my voiceover business evolved? Well, when I first started getting into voiceover, it was like I was working in the radio station. I'm working in a radio station now. My company is merging with another one. Will I still be here a year from now in this studio? I don't know. But I know I'm going to be okay either way. I've got this world that I'm creating. So I'm evolving, and I'm trying to prepare as much as I can. How has my voiceover business changed? Well, when I first got started, I thought radio and TV commercials. That's what I thought I could do. That's what I thought voiceover was when I first started. There's so much more. There's so many more outlets now than there were when I started doing voiceover. There was no such thing as a podcast when I started doing voiceover. I have a podcast now. It went from producing and voicing radio commercials and TV commercials to producing custom audio productions for business owners, podcast intros and outros, explainer videos and narrations that initially were on local area networks in businesses. Now they're on the internet. They're on corporate websites. This stuff wasn't here, and now it is. Podcasts, the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, all these media outlets that are out there. And my website, the Voiceover Athlete. How has that changed? Why is that? Why did I start the Voiceover Athlete? Because my business needs to evolve. I need to evolve. My interests in health and fitness are very important to me, and they've made a tremendous impact in my life for the better. I know that's improved my voiceover career. What I'm about to say, I don't want to sound conceited or arrogant or anything like that, but I've been doing this for what I'm doing in radio now, radio commercials and voiceovers. I've been doing it for 17 years, almost, and I've been at CBS for almost 20. I started my career with CBS Radio 23 years ago. This is the longest I've done anything. And so I've done a lot of other people's projects. I've voiced an awful lot of other people's stuff. I've done thousands of radio commercials. I've done a bunch of TV commercials, I don't want to sound ungrateful. It's been wonderful. I love it, and I will continue to do it. But at the same time, I want to do more. I want to create my own stuff. I want to voice my own projects. And what I'm interested in is health, fitness, overall well-being, and the Voiceover Athlete is an outlet for that. So I'm taking my interests and I'm creating. And like I said, I've been in a bit of a funk. Can't get out of my own way in my head to create. When I heard that book, I was like, you know what? That's what I needed. And you don't know where it's going to come from sometimes. You just got to be open to it and looking for it and say, okay, where am I going with this? And you got to stop. You got to step back. And, I was doing video games. That's another voiceover genre that I've been in. I'll tell you, video games are tough work. I've done audiobooks. Audiobooks, tough work. I mean, it's long-form narration. When you're used to working in 10, 30, 60-second clips, and you're going for hours, that's a huge jump. And I like audiobooks, but, I'd rather narrate my own audiobook at this point. I don't want to sound conceited or arrogant, but if I'm going to invest that much time on an audiobook, I know a lot of people love audiobooks. They like to narrate audiobooks. It's just not my thing. I don't get totally jazzed up about it, and that's fine, unless it's mine, and that's in the works. And so I've gotten to this point in my career where I'm like, all right, I want to do my own thing with this. I'm still going to do work on other people's projects. I get invested in other people's projects. I want my contribution to other people's projects, goals, and dreams, because that's what we're working on. I know I've talked about this. I'm going to give it 120%. Have you ever had anybody say to you, I was at a party, I don't know how long ago it was, might have been a year ago, and they found out what I do. And they found out that I had done some work for the host of this party prior to them going to work for this other person. And this other person said, well, we'll have to have you do something for us, but, make this one better, Or have you ever had anybody say, make this one really good? They said to me, you'll have to make ours better than you did for the other one. I looked at them and I said, I always give 120% for any client. People don't understand how insulting that is. Not to you, but to the fact that you would treat one customer better than another. Every client is important. I'm all over the place. This is what's coming out of my head. I'm working without a net today, people. And I'm okay with that. I hope you're finding this valuable. If not, that's okay too. You're probably not listening anymore. You've probably left the building. You're on to the next podcast. Or you're yelling at the car in front of you. What did they just do? Tell me. I guess my takeaways for you is don't be afraid to have your business evolve and change. Don't be afraid to have your business be a business that you create to suit you. That's what I'm working on now. I'm making this for me. I turned 50. I've said this a bunch of times. It was kind of a big deal for me. My dad's, somebody who says, it's just a number. For me, for some reason, it means something. It means like, I've had another trip around the sun. And I'm saying, okay, maybe this is a midlife crisis thing. I don't know. I'm not going to go out and buy a Porsche. And I love my wife. Absolutely adore that woman. So all that stuff's good. It's just, I've been kind of going through this little recharge, searching, where's my creative path? Where's my creative outlet? What am I going to do next? How am I going to grow this business? And do I want to grow it in a way that I've had it in the past? I've created this product called the Audiomercial. I've had it trademarked. I've paid lawyers to get it trademarked and recognized by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I'm in the process of doing that for something else. I spent a lot of money on it. I made a lot of money on it, but I'm not so I don't know how much more of those I want to do. I've mentioned Dan Kennedy a number of times in this podcast in numerous episodes. I remember being at a marketing conference once where he said, nothing's worse than having a success that you don't want. You could be very, very, very successful at something and hate doing it. And I'm not there. I don't hate doing anything. I'll be honest with you. I hate bookkeeping. I do it, but I hate it. I have an accountant do my taxes and file all my returns, and I have a payroll service that does my payroll for me and does all those reports and withholdings and all that kind of stuff for the state and the federal government, Social Security, FICA, whatever, blah, 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 yada, 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 alphabet soup. All the people who have fingers in my pie taking little pieces away from me. That stuff I have the professionals do, but I'm aware of it. I'm on top of it, but I hate bookkeeping. I love recording. I love editing. I love mixing. I love creating. I love writing. That's where I'm at. When I'm there, you can't beat me. I'm like, where do I want to take this? And I want to make this something that I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to love it. And I do. I love this podcast. I love this podcast. I love this platform. I love this medium. I love hearing from listeners of the podcast. I love getting emails from you. I love your comments and your feedback. 95% of the feedback is very positive and heartening and enriching and inspiring, and it makes me want to do more. Every once in a while, I'll get somebody who said, I don't like what you said in that thing. And I'm like, good. Made you think about it. And that's okay. So that's where I'm at. Where are you at with your business? How has your voiceover business changed over the years? Do you ever get into a funk like I do? Like I did? This episode is me digging my way out of that. I've shared stuff with you in this episode that I've never really shared before in this podcast. You read in my personal story, my marketing piece, a little bit, but I've gone into more detail here than I ever have. This wasn't an easy thing for me to do, but some reason I felt I needed to do it. I'm not perfect. I'm not Superman. And I want to share that with you just so that you know that just keep plugging away at it and you'll be fine. But don't look at, sometimes I look at other people who do podcasts or create and all that kind of stuff. And I go, wow, how do they do that? How do they get all that done? And, you get to know them and they go, there are times where I struggle. There are times I have a tough time, but I keep at it. So that's what this is about. I have times when I struggle. I got stuff going on in my world. And, I don't share absolutely everything because I respect those that are going through things that's private, And but I share a lot with you. But I hadn't shared this, and I felt like, what? I need to be honest with people. I got to say, hey, you know what? I needed a break. I was having a tough time. I was like, I hate the winter. What am I doing? I'm 50, yada, yada, yada. Feeling kind of sorry for myself. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's over. And so I'm being honest with you. Everybody goes through it. I go through it. I've gone through it. I'm coming out of it. So I want to ask you to think about all those things. How has your business evolved? Do you ever get into a funk? How do you get out of your funk? Where do you see your business going? These are all questions. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I've got more episodes lined up. There'll be more from me in the next week or so. If you're not on the mailing list, do sign up for the mailing list. It's right there on the right-hand side of the voiceovermarketingpodcast.com webpage. Get on there. It's a sequence. It's like every week I send out an update with a question and a thought for you to consider. There's no sale other than just to go listen to the episode or re-listen to the episode. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. I want to thank you for all your support. I want to thank you for being a loyal listener of this podcast and being part of my world. I really, really appreciate it. And all the emails say, hey, when's the next episode? Hey, what are you doing? How are you? I love it. Thank you. You have no idea how important that stuff is. I sit here and I create and I can see the numbers, but to hear back and have this be a two-way conversation, that's the neat thing about the podcasting. So reach out. I'm inviting you, reach out. I'm not in an ivory tower. I make it difficult to access me during the day because I'm recording and producing. Throughout this whole thing, I've been still doing my thing. It's just like the extra effort for other things. It's been a bit of a stretch. But I'm back. I'm just showing you I'm human. So I'm a human being. If you want to reach out, you want to just say hi, you want to say thank you, please do. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to make a comment, if you'd love to review this podcast, if you want to rate it on iTunes, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's made donations in the past. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Our program originates in the Boston studios. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, we bid you au revoir, keep your chin up, and the best of luck.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it would be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and future topics you'd like discussed at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. And if you'd like more information on one-on-one coaching where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and share your voice with the world.